Thank you for joining us. In the confusion that exists in our world, I've always liked the methodical and mutually fair process of enabling different sides to present their points of view without being obstructed, to make their case before an impartial judge. Today I have the privilege and honour of having Judge Patti Englander Henning as our esteemed guest to update us on how the court system is functioning at this strange time in history following these messages.
A question I often get asked is, why should young people care about the spread of coronavirus? Well, we know that people with underlying medical conditions over the age of 60 are at highest risk, but they've got to get it from somebody.
Social distancing is really physical separation of people.
It's what we refer to when we ask people to stay at least 6 feet apart.
Not going to bars, not going to restaurants, not going to theaters where there are a lot of people. It all just means physical separation so that you have a space between you and others who might actually be infected or infect you.
We all have a role to play in preventing person-to-person spread of this disease, which can be deadly for vulnerable groups. For more information on how you can social distance, please go to coronavirus.gov.
Life Extension magazine brings you new discoveries in health and anti-aging. Our science-based research and supplements are so advanced they're many years ahead of the medical mainstream, with quality control standards that exceed FDA mandates. Life Extension has covered groundbreaking medical research for more than 35 years. For your health and future, you deserve the best. Learn more at lifeextension.com.
Joining us now is Judge Englander Henning. Your Honour, it's such an honour and privilege to be with you here today like this.
It's my pleasure, thank you.
How strange it is that we are having a conversation not in a TV studio, but from our homes. What strange times.
Very tumultuous times right now.
Unfortunately, but we have to be optimistic. I have many questions I'd like to informally ask you as we sit here today, and one of them would be really, how does this horrific pandemic affect the way the court operates?
There have been tremendous changes, obviously, once the pandemic hit. I am pleased to say that the court system, which usually moves very slowly, moved very quickly to adapt to these circumstances. And all of the hearings are being run through all the courts, at least in Broward County and most of Florida, and actually most of the country, via Zoom. So we are able to have hearings run through. We cannot do jury trials yet. That's the main problem that we're having right now. And we are working very hard. In fact, I am working with not only with Broward County, but with the NYU Civil Jury Project to figure out ways to invent, actually, and then initiate jury trials of some degree, if not totally, during the pandemic times that we have, so that we can maintain people's constitutional rights to trial, and also keep everybody who's due to come into the courthouse safe and maintain CDC requirements.
Exciting and strange times. And I was just thinking, when you were first elected, you were, I believe, the youngest judge in Broward County, Florida.
In the state, yes. I was the youngest judge ever elected in the state.
And you've been serving in this capacity, for good Lord, approximately 40 years.
Yes, it has been a privilege to serve my entire career, basically, on the bench.
One of the things that I find sometimes difficult to understand is the fluctuations in different appointments individuals have in different fields, and of course in the judiciary as well. Every now and then, it seems like every year or so, there's another election. And I was just wondering, Why would anybody in their right mind want to run against somebody of your stature?
Well, that's very kind of you to say. As you know, there are elections for trial court judges in Florida, and the requirements for serving on the bench as a judge is to be a member of the Florida Bar for 5 years. And so anyone can run who has those qualifications. I have been very fortunate my last 7 terms in not having an opponent, but each time that my term ends, I anticipate that there may be someone who wishes to run against me. This time I got opposition.
Huh, how interesting.
That's one term. What's interesting is campaigning during the pandemic. That is certainly different than the campaigning I did 35 years ago.
Speaking of which, what are the challenges in general facing a judge?
Well, we have many. The first challenge that I find as a judge is people's expectation of what they expect a judge in the court to be compared to what reality is. There are numerous judicial shows now. You've got Judge Judy, Divorce Court, all these TV shows. And people expect that that's what court is. They expect that the judge is going to have a nasty quip. They assume that it's going to be decided right away. They expect, especially from TV shows, they expect there to be technical evidence that's going to show beyond a shadow of a doubt how a case should go. They expect the unexpected witness to show up and tie everything together. And of course, they expect it all to be done within 60 minutes and 4 commercials. And that's not, that's not reality. And nor is that what anybody really wants. You want to go in front of a judge who is listening. When I first took the bench, I used to say, please God, give me the wisdom of Solomon. And shortly thereafter, I realized that it changed to, please God, give me the patience of Job. Let me be able to listen to everybody. Let me hear their stories. Let me be able to create a courtroom where they're comfortable telling the story. They want somebody who can listen to these difficult problems that they're having and understand those problems. They don't want someone who shuts them off like they see on TV. And so it's important to have them understand that that's what they should be getting in court. That's what they deserve from a judge. And also that it's going to go a little slower than they anticipate. That the wheels of justice grind, but they grind a little bit slower than people want them to do.
Speaking of expectations, many anxious people going to court think that if they hire a very expensive attorney who puts on a real good show, that would have some influence on an impartial court's decision. And what is the reality with regard to that concern?
I don't think that that's true. I think that what needs and should be heard is the lawyer is prepared. If he knows the law and she knows the facts of the case and can present it to a judge who is prepared, then there is a fairness in the system, and to expect the fairness in the system. It's difficult a lot of times when someone comes in pro se, which means they're representing themselves, because a court can't be their lawyer and their judge. We're not allowed to do that. So if they don't know the rules and procedures of the court, then they may feel that they're not getting a fair shake, so to speak, from the system. It can be very expensive to have witnesses prepared for a case, have depositions taken for a case, have the attorneys with the knowledge and the ability to research the issues on a case, to go to court or around the country to find these witnesses. So it can obviously be very costly, but the outcome should remain the same, and the judge should rule based on the facts and the evidence that's presented to them and the law that's in existence.
Absolutely. Your Honor, I'd like us to continue, but we have to pause for these commercial messages. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
We are back with Judge Englander Henning. Your Honor, I'd like us to continue kind of where we left off. In fact, I'd like to ask you some personal questions, if I may.
Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
What made you decide to get into law?
I grew up having been taught that public service was an honorable profession. I watched my parents be involved. Dad was a justice of the peace and an attorney. And I was fascinated by the work that I saw him do, even from a young age. As my career moved forward, originally I wanted international relations, and then decided that what I really wanted to do was help on a more local level. And so I entered the legal profession. And it was a natural progression from there to running for the bench, for the county court. I did one term on the county court, and then the remainder of my years have been on the circuit court.
I apologize for interrupting. Share with our viewers what the difference is between the different courts.
Yes. In Florida, there are two trial level courts. The county court is the lower level. They hear cases now, they've just raised jurisdiction to cases of up to $30,000 and misdemeanors, such as simple battery, DUIs, cases such as that, and small claims cases go there. The circuit court, which is the bench that I sit on, handles the cases of over $30,000 for a civil case. They handle the felonies on the criminal side of the case. That's where the probate court is. That's where the family court is. Divorce proceedings take place there. Forfeitures take place there. And the court I sit on is the complex civil litigation division. That's a specialty court. It handles much fewer cases than a regular civil division. They usually in a trial, in a civil trial, there's one plaintiff and one defendant, and usually maybe one or two issues that are well known that get tried, such as an auto negligence case. My cases are much more complex. They have issues that need a lot of preparation. They have many parties involved in the cases. There may be many witnesses involved in the cases. They can have novel legal issues in the cases, and usually they are the lengthier cases. In fact, there's a special rule in the procedures for handling these type of cases, for managing these cases. And that's what I do. I keep a much closer hands-on approach to these cases and guide them through their complex issues so that they can hopefully get resolved.
Your Honor, how difficult is it for you to remain impartial in complex and other cases?
I have learned and trained myself to separate my view of anything from what I do as a judge on the bench and rule according to the law and according to the facts. I feel the weight of my robe, as I do in any case and at all times, to make sure that those people that are in front of me are there only on their case and their issues. And you need to set aside any personal views that you have. That's not what a judge is to do. And after 40 years, I believe that I am able to do that and do it on a constant basis with each case that I have. But a good judge has got to set aside any feelings that they have for the facts or the issues that are before them and rule on the law and the facts.
Your Honor, an awkward question I must ask is, was there any special challenge in your being a lady, a woman, attorney, and then judge, and frankly from an illustrious Jewish family in South Florida?
When I went to law school, and I went to the University of Florida in Gainesville in the 70s, there was a great deal of discrimination there at that time, not only against women, but against particularly Jewish women. When I tried to get a job at one of the law firms there was a lot of disagreement among the attorneys about even having me intern there. And there were many of the attorneys didn't have me do any work for them because of that. When I became an assistant attorney general in Tallahassee, I found that when I would go to court, some of the judges would make sure that they called the men counselor this and counselor this and yes sir that. And more frequently than not, I was said, and what do you have to say, little lady? Which was very disconcerting to someone who had the same qualifications as the other side of the table who was doing the argument. When I first came down to Broward County had a very large Jewish population back in the late 70s, early 80s, which was when I was running. And so there was certainly more acceptance of having a Jewish candidate. There were Jewish judges on the bench. So my running, I think my youth more than my religion played a part. But once you got into the judges' programs and their conferences, you had to make sure that things weren't being said on Rosh Hashanah, because frequently they would be said on the holidays. And it took a while for them to realize that that was improper, that there needed to be accommodation made for the number of Jewish judges that were coming onto the bench. And the same way we do now for other diverse groups as they come onto the bench and become more noticeable and active in the judiciary and in the court system.
Changing subjects again, Your Honor, we are living in somewhat of a melting pot, different cultures, interest groups and so forth. And of course, you have to be impartial, but I'd like to ask you, what are your thoughts with regard to the challenges facing the Jewish community as a whole at this time in history?
When I first came to Broward County, it certainly was not as diverse as it is now. The diversity has been a major help to the court system in that we not only are able to learn about the various cultures that we have in our community, but we also, and respect them, but we also are able to see, and the public can see, that there are now more attorneys, more judges, more staff in the courthouse, whether it be interpreters, court reporters. The community can see that they're not coming up in front of someone that is different from them. And they're also in front of those who reflect their community. I think that our court system, while it now is not necessarily a mirror image of what the community looks like here in Broward County or throughout the state, but it certainly is reflective of what we are and what our melting pot is. And you see that in all aspects of the court system now when you come in, which is far better than it was 40 years ago when I got on the bench. Now 40% of the judges in Broward County happen to be female. Every group is represented on the bench here in Broward County, I'm proud to say.
This is all fascinating, and before we conclude, I'd like to ask you, what are your plans for the future?
Well, hopefully for the next 6 years, I will be serving another term on the bench, handling the complex cases. I have been very fortunate that the successive chief judges have asked me to manage that division. So I would like to do that. I am working on specific projects that I hope to be able to continue. One is to get an increase in juror pay. One of the problems the court system has is that we cannot get a wide range of jurors to come in and serve. And it's not really because they don't want to. I find as I talk to them, it's because they can't afford to. And so I've done some research, and I have found that there are some states that increased juror pay, particularly for lengthy trials like I handle, and that the number of jurors come in through the system. When that happens, you have a broader base and you actually can get a jury of your peers because they're not worried about the financial angle of not being able to serve. I am working with the local and national bar organizations to have them prepare and submit legislation, particularly to the Florida legislature, to increase juror pay. So that we can again get a better, broader base of jurors. I also would like to continue working. I'm working with both locally and with the New York University Civil Jury Project, trying to get initiate and to institute, as I believe I've said, the remote jury trials and proceedings. There are so many issues with that as to how we can maintain constitutional rights and the right to confront a juror, the right to confront an accuser, how to introduce evidence into a remote trial, how we get jurors to a remote trial, what happens to people who don't have computer systems at home to be able to use. Are we able to have them at the library? Are we able to have them in a different building somewhere? Wouldn't it be nice if Apple or somebody decided to contribute laptops to the court system the way they do to the schools? There are so many ways to help bring what our new norm is going to be into the system. And that's what I'm working on, and I enjoy working on it, and I hope that I can work on it the remainder of this term and bring it to fruition. And of course, handling the different cases and learning something new in every case that I have.
Your Honor, this has been absolutely fascinating and a real privilege and honor for me. Thank you so very much for being with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Stay well and stay safe.
Thank you, Your Honor.
The Israeli Supreme Court, located in Jerusalem, is an architectural gem, acclaimed and admired by architects around the world. The product of an international architectural competition held in 1986, the building's practical purpose is, of course, to be a center for bureaucratic affairs. Yet, its design serves psychological and emotional function as well. It evokes for those walking through its halls the values of justice, law, and righteousness, which it draws from biblical practices and metaphors. In biblical times, the judges would sit at the city gates of every community. The Torah insists that justice and righteousness be accessible to all as an integral component of public and communal life. Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 18. Judges and officers you shall place at all your gates, and they shall judge the people with righteous justice. In the Supreme Court building, gate-like forms hewn in the stone surrounding the entrances to the courtrooms and throughout the building evoke this theme. The majestic courtyard is inspired by a verse from the Book of Psalms. Truth springs up from the earth, and justice is reflected from the heavens. This verse is visually expressed through the elements of stone, water, and sky. The stone, which comes from the bedrock of the earth, represents the solidity of law. The sky, reflected in the water, represents justice. In the library and elsewhere in the building, law and justice are represented by geometric shapes inspired by biblical metaphors. The straight line, which symbolizes a direct path, represents the concepts of law and truth, as in Psalms chapter 119, verse 137, "Your laws are straight." The concept of justice is represented by circles found throughout the building and expressed in Psalms chapter 23, verse 3. He leads me in the circles of justice for the sake of his name.
Instead of just shielding you from the virus, this mask is going to kill the virus on contact. So if someone is exposed to the virus, the mask material will actually kill it.
It's a race against the clock, and Israel's just taken a big step forward in the efforts to contain the coronavirus pandemic. Israel's Biological Research Institute announcing a major breakthrough in the development of an antibody to COVID-19. Unlike existing medicines being tested, such as hydroxychloroquine and remdesivir, antibody drugs are being designed specifically to disable the new virus where it's most vulnerable. A statement by Israel's Ministry of Defense says the newly developed antibody has been shown to attack coronavirus in a monoclonal way and can neutralize it within the bodies of those infected. Defense Minister Naftali Bennett hailed the development as a, quote, amazing achievement, adding, "I'm proud of the Institute staff for this terrific breakthrough." with a hope to save millions of lives around the world and help humanity overcome its biggest medical threat of the century.
Life Extension magazine brings you new discoveries in health and anti-aging. Our science-based research and supplements are so advanced they're many years ahead of the medical mainstream, with quality control standards that exceed FDA mandates. Life Extension has covered groundbreaking medical research for more than 35 years. For your health and future, you deserve the best. Learn more at lifeextension.com.
Find magic again. Sprout by HP. With Intel RealSense technology inside, now you can bend the rules of creativity outside.
This concludes our special show for today from On Location in South Florida. I'm Richard Peritz. Thank you for being with us.